Welcome back to another episode of Esports, Metaverse, and Beyond.
How are you doing today, Chase?
I'm doing great today, Sage, and I'm really excited because today we're going to be interviewing award-winning educator, founder, and chair of Esports Canada, Melissa Burns. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for the interview too. I know it's going to be amazing. And I think this might be the first time we're interviewing someone out of the United States of America. So it'll be interesting to see their perspective.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm excited to be here.
Since this is a show for gamers, we'd like to play a little game before diving out for a bit of fun.
Sure, let's do it.
Game time. Melissa, we've heard that you're homeschooled. What was your favorite part of being homeschooled, and would you recommend it to parents?
I loved it. I think it was a really good fit for me personally. My brother and I were both homeschooled, and I think one of my favorite aspects of it was the flexibility that it gave me in my schedule, because I was able to really flow with what made sense for me as a learner at that time. It allowed me to follow my interests and passions with a lot more autonomy, which is really exciting. And it also afforded me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I had to stick to a strict school schedule, where I learned a lot of life skills, like going to the grocery store and learning how to make those decisions about what to buy and how to plan and what things cost. And even just the experiences of getting to the way that my family did homeschooling was we got to go and experience our learning. So instead of learning from books and research about what politics are like, we went to our legislature and got to sit in on house debates and stuff like that. So it was very much an experiential learning system, and I really loved that.
Okay. Do you think it will be easily accessible for parents to be able to homeschool their kids? And some parents have jobs, so we'd like to hear your opinion on that.
I think for the right students, it's a really great option if it works for your family, and it's not always going to be feasible. But if it is an option for your family, I think it's definitely a really great one to explore. I was very fortunate where both of my parents were actually teachers. And so my dad continued to teach, and my mom retired so that she could teach my brother and I at home. And we were able to make that work. And I know that that's not the case for everybody, but I'm really grateful for that opportunity and experience.
Well, that's great.
Melissa, do you have a favorite esports team? And if so, which team is it?
You know what? I have been a diehard Cloud9 fan, and I know I'm probably going to make some enemies from saying that out loud. But going way back to early LCS days of League of Legends, I used to be a really big fan of their teams, and I would always pick them on. We would play like fantasy League of Legends, and you could pick your favorite players for each position and see how they did for the week and everything. And I always picked as many Cloud9 players as possible. So a double lift, it was always my favorite.
That's a good choice. Now, for our bonus question, what's your favorite music genre and artist?
That's a hard one. And the reason it's a hard one for me is because I actually have a music degree. So I just love music in general. I love all music. And I think that there is great music in every genre that there is. So you just kind of have to follow what you're interested in. I would say right now, I'm really enjoying some EDM. My kids have been really into EDM lately. And so we're listening to a lot of dance music.
Okay. Okay, that's a pretty good choice.
Awesome.
What's your choice?
Well, like you said before, there's a lot of music genres. So it's hard to categorize it since I know the music, I just don't necessarily know the genre. But I guess
Okay. Yeah.
or hip hop too.
Oh, I
I
love
like
hip hop.
I would say my favorite music genre is R&B.
Nice. Oh, excellent. Solid choices. Whenever I do my workouts, hip hop and R&B are go-tos for me.
Ooh, nice. Awesome. Thanks for playing. You just earned 400 points.
Yes.
Melissa, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you became involved in the esports industry?
Sure. So I actually ended up becoming a teacher myself. So I had worked in performance for a while. And then after doing musical theater for several years, I switched into education. And when I got into the classroom, as any teacher can tell you, education is very much based on relationships and creating safe spaces for students to learn. And at the time when I had started my career, I was working as a music teacher, and I only had my students for 30 minutes, 3 times a cycle. A cycle is 6 days. So for every 6 days, I got to see them for 30 minutes, 3 times, which is not a lot of time, and definitely not enough to build meaningful relationships with my students so that they were in a position where they felt comfortable and safe to take risks in my class. And I knew that that was really, really important for their learning experience. And so I wanted to get more involved in the school itself and more involved in the extracurriculars at the school. And I noticed that there were some music options and theater and drama and some crafting and lots of sports, but there was nothing for gamers. And I've been a gamer my whole life. I've always loved playing video games, and had been around esports for many, many years. My husband had been coaching esports since 2012, which is a really, really long time. And I went to my principal at this new school and I said, can I start an esports club for the grade 7, 8 students? And they had no idea what esports was at the time. It was 2016. They're like, if you can find the equipment, go for it. And so I did some searching around. I asked the other teachers at the school if anybody had any gear lying around. I found a Wii U system at the time and started a Smash Club. And from that experience, I learned a lot about what it did for my students, all the benefits it brought them, and all the great, rich learning opportunities it provided them. And that became a starting point for me. And so as I engaged with them in that school, I was able to then build off of those experiences and build off of the knowledge and the research that I had been doing and start a provincial esport association. So just like you have states, we have provinces. And so I started a provincial organization, which later became a national organization. And since then, it has now expanded so that Esports Canada is not just for schools and for students, we also are the home of Canadian varsity gaming for all of our post-secondary institutions, so colleges and universities. And we also are the home for Team Canada for our international competitions in the amateur to professional space as well. So we have a really cool pathway for students to explore their passion and learn through that experience, have opportunities to explore post-secondary if they're interested in that, or continue it as a passion outside of the school environment through our amateur to professional space and competitive gaming in community settings as well.
Well, good job, Melissa. Your company really grew from just an extracurricular activity to now a major organization. A good job. And normally we ask this as a bonus question. We didn't do it today, but what's your favorite video game? Since you seem like you like a lot of video games.
Oh, I love video games. League of Legends will forever be my favorite. I absolutely love it. But I started way, way, way back in the day in my grandma's basement playing the NES, playing Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and that's really where I got the start. Was in my grandma's basement, and playing some PC DOS games. We used to have to actually like punch in a code and have a big floppy disk. I'm very old. But it was lots of fun. So there's been a lot of games that have impacted my life over the years, but League of Legends has been, for esports specifically, that one's always been my go-to.
All right. Sage, it's your turn now.
Well, what inspired you? What inspired you to integrate the esports into K through 12 education?
What inspired me? The students. Honestly, it was the students themselves that really inspired me. I knew that I had a passion for gaming, and I knew that a lot of my students were gamers, but I didn't realize how many of them were gamers until I actually started digging into it. And once I started doing the research, I realized that the research from the States is showing that as much as 97% of students between 13 to 18 are gaming regularly. So this isn't something that a few of my students are doing. This is something that all of my students are doing. And what I saw was this was an opportunity for us to connect, like I talked about before, with that importance of relationships in education. But it was also an opportunity to teach so many different skills, to help them find a passion for whether it's STEM or broadcast and shoutcasting like you guys are doing, whether it's in the gaming and technical analysis. There were so many different things for them to explore and skills to develop that would help them be successful no matter what they ended up doing. But because they are all gamers, I also wanted them to be successful in the social situations involved with esports in particular, because video games you can often do in isolation. You can play a lot of one player adventure games and do that on your own. But esports and those open world games like Minecraft and Roblox, and they encourage you to build community and to connect with other people. And I wanted to make sure that I was providing my students and students from across the country with opportunities to develop the skills to do that successfully. You probably have noticed that sometimes it's not always a great place to be. And we know that students sometimes fail. Failure is part of life. Even grown-ups fail all the time. And so I wanted to make sure they had a safe place to fail so that we could change the way the conversation ended, so that instead of having students get frustrated and rage quitting or becoming toxic online, that the teachers could be part of those conversations and help them learn how to regulate their emotions in those high intensity moments of gaming where your adrenaline is peaking, but also be able to really think about how they're contributing online and what kind of effect it has on the people around them and themselves.
Well, it's no surprise that kids and teenagers would love to be playing video games as an extracurricular activity, but how did you persuade the school board to allow an esports program?
So it was okay. I'm very good at being creative. So I'm a creative thinker. I always have been, hence the degree in music. And so I tend to approach problems as a challenge that I can solve creatively. So if it doesn't work the first time, I look at, well, what worked, what didn't work, and how do I change the way that I approach this problem differently? So it's kind of like a video game in itself, where I approached bringing video games into schools kind of like a video game. So when I first approached it, there were a lot of limitations because they're very important limitations, looking at things like student privacy and data literacy, and looking at student safety, and all of those things are extremely important. But it didn't mean that we couldn't bring esports into schools. It meant that we had to reframe the way we approached esports in schools and how to create those opportunities for our students in safe ways. And so whenever we would come up across something that didn't work for very valid reasons, I put on my creative brain and looked at how can we approach this differently so that students are safe and they can have these opportunities. And so I've been able to work with a lot of really incredible professionals from the Board of Education and from the different school divisions and the IT professionals working with those school divisions to be able to find opportunities to establish best practices that work for Canadian standards of keeping students safe while allowing them the opportunity to have these experiences. And the shift that we're going through right now is looking at how we can bridge the gap between extracurricular and co-curricular learning with esports. So right now, a lot of our learning and a lot of our esports in schools is happening after school as an extra that you can do, but we're now exploring ways to integrate it more intentionally into the curricular learning as well. So we're starting to look at how we can develop curriculum with departments of education and with different universities, faculties of education across the country, so that students can have these really rich learning experiences as part of their school day and not just after their school day.
All right, that's a perfect segue into my next question. What what do you believe is the benefits of integrating esports into a school curriculum?
I think that there are so many reasons that it's a great thing to bring into schools. I think that for starters, when we're looking at student engagement, kids love playing games and we know that. So it automatically is a buy-in for them. It provides an opportunity for us as educators to validate something that's really important for our students, which again makes it a better learning environment for everybody because now the students feel seen, heard, valued for something that they really enjoy. It used to be like when I was growing up that when you asked a little kid like what they want to be when they grow up, the traditional answers would be things like a firefighter, an astronaut, a lawyer, a doctor, those kinds of jobs. But when you ask kids now what they want to do, a lot of them are actually answering with things like, I want to be an influencer or I want to be a Twitch streamer. Those are really common things. And so when we're looking at that and realizing that many of these things are viable careers, but that there's also all of these really important transferable skills, we call them global competencies and soft skills that help you no matter where you end up going in a career, that it really adds a lot of value to the learning experience. So, something that I like to do is help educators find ways to bring game based learning into their classrooms so that they can have those holistic experiences where they're developing not only core curricular outcomes, whether it's English language arts, STEM connections, anything like that, or we're looking at some of those transferable skills that are going to benefit them no matter what they end up doing.
All right, that's amazing.
Can you explain the work that Esport Canada does to support the growth of the Canadian esports ecosystem?
Yeah, so we, as I kind of touched on earlier, are very multifaceted in our approach. Because we were founded as an education based organization, we have a really well established education program. So the way that that operates is that we have a Canadian East or an Esport Canada EDU council, an education council that has representatives from across the country, all teachers that come together and they talk about how things are going in their provinces, what kinds of needs they have, how to better engage students. And we're able to work together to collectively build capacity, put together resources, and really support the growth in each province. So each province has their own uh, provincially run Scholastic Esport or Association as part of Esport Canada. So that way they can operate their esport program the way it needs to be run to best serve the students in their province. Because each province, Canada is a very big country, just like the United States. So there's a lot of differences. Just like you have schools in California would be very different than schools in Minnesota. It's very much the same in Canada, where every province has its own kind of culture. And so we allow each of those provinces to really support the culture of their province through these provincial esport associations. And then we get to learn together as a Canadian council. So we're able to then work on things like curriculum development, resources, um, regulations, sharing rule books, all kinds of different things. We host different national competitions, so regional and national competitions. Local competitions are all done by the provincial associations. So that's how we kind of have things running in our school based program. Our post secondary program is their director of post secondary is Tyler Hetherington out of Fanshawe College. They get together, a group of them every single week for meetings, regular meetings, to look at how the programs are doing, what does recruitment look like, what kinds of programs do they have, because you have to realize they have some programs that are focused on competitive aspects of the sport of esports itself. And then a lot of them also have programs that actually allow students to study esports as well. And so then they get to have conversations about what those programs look like, how they can help develop new programs. And we've really been focusing on establishing standards of excellence in the post secondary institutions so that we are able to support institutions in finding ways to better provide for those programs so that they have sustainability as they continue to grow. Because several years ago, a lot of these programs were just student-run programs. And so now we're asking these institutions to fully support these programs by giving them staffing to actually support the ongoing progress of the program, facilities, and infrastructure so that they can actually develop their programs. And so that's kind of how our post-secondary program runs. And then on the other side, we have our competitive space. So in the competitive space, we're connecting with communities and content creators and giving them a space to come together, share what's working, what's not working, and be able to advocate for them to our federal government. And we also are the Canadian chapter of the International Esport Federation. So we host the sanctioned national qualifiers for international events. So right now we're just wrapping up our national qualifiers for Tekken and CSGO and Dota 2. And then the winners of those will be playing against the United States in a regional event. And the winners of those get to go to the World Esport Championships in Romania this summer.
Oh, well, that's awesome. It seems like your programs have grown quite a lot in the past couple of years. Can you give us a rough estimate of about how many people are in these programs?
Oh, lots, but there are a lot of people. I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but it's been really great to see the steady increase of support, and more recently, a very steep increase of support. So our organization is run completely off of volunteers. So everybody in our organization is volunteering their time, their efforts, their expertise to this program completely pro bono. And so it's really incredible to see professional industry leaders, lawyers, marketing, all these different people come together and share their time, their expertise, their resources with something because they believe in the vision of what we're doing.
All right. And how do you ensure that your programs are inclusive and accessible for everyone, regardless of their skill level or background?
That is a really great question. So, something that I'm really passionate about is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, when I started Esport Canada, I wanted it to be built different. So, from a systemic level, I wanted it to be fundamentally different and built into the constitution of it the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, the way that I've explained it to other people is that if our vision for Esport Canada is to serve Canadian gamers don't all look like me. I don't represent all of those people. I represent a very small piece of that puzzle because Canada is a very multicultural and diverse country, just like the United States is. And so I need to surround myself with people who have different backgrounds, different perspectives than I do, so that I can best serve, collectively, we can best serve Canadian gamers. And so every single person on our team represents somebody different and a perspective that needs to have a voice and needs to be present at the table. And so it's not perfect yet. We're still working on building our team to make sure that we have as much representation as possible, but we have it built into the foundational constitution of our organization to value that, to actively seek out those diverse perspectives because it makes us better.
Melissa, how do you address concerns that some parents and educators may have about the potential negative effects of esports on students?
Okay, negative effects. I would say, from my experience, and I've been doing this since 2016, I've never had a parent complain. Never.
Oh,
And that might be unique to me, but I've never had a parent complain. Um, it's it's certainly not something that students complain about. They're very excited by it. They love the opportunity to be able to do this at school. And the most common comment I get from parents is that they wish that they had had something like this when they were in school. And that's been probably the number one comment I get from parents. But sometimes there are other people, decision makers, administrators, who do have concerns because they don't understand how bringing something that has a reputation of being mindless and mind numbing into schools would be beneficial to student success. And so, as I'm able to show them what these programs actually look like, how they impact our students, and especially a lot of the research that comes out to support that, that's really what makes a big difference. It's that combination of I need to see it on paper and see the research that supports it. So there is some really good research out there right now, and we definitely still need to get more and current research to support that on paper. But really, all you have to do is step into one of those rooms to see the impact, because you will see right away students that are engaged, students that are thinking critically, especially when we're doing it with intention. And I think that's where the teacher word pedagogy becomes really important. And that's a big part of what we do in Esport Canada EDU, is really building capacity amongst educators in the area of pedagogy specifically, so that our students go from being passive consumers of video games and esports, where they sit there and play mindlessly and get frustrated and become dysregulated and rage quit or say something inappropriate, to being intentional in our implementation of it, so that they're then learning how to make really quick decision making, that they're able to develop their critical thinking and analysis, that they're able to think about interpersonal skills and how to communicate and collaborate effectively in high intensity situations. And so once you actually see that in action, and you've seen how the impact of good pedagogy paired with something that's already engaging for students impacts student learning and engagement, that really sells it pretty quickly, because you can actually tangibly see the numbers that are on the pages.
Well, Sage, you know what time it is?
Yep, it's time for Esports Metaverse.
News. Melissa, what trends are you currently seeing at the intersection of esports and education currently?
I think we're seeing a lot of adoption right now. I think in the early stages, a few years ago, it was still very much in the let's see what this is. Now I think that we're past that. There is research, there are programs that are established. We're seeing a lot of folks that are now adopting these programs, a lot more interest around how do I actually get this started? What does this look like in my schools? What kind of infrastructure should I be buying for my school? And then again, that piece of curriculum. I think curriculum is going to be the really big conversation over the next 5 years.
Well, Melissa, just now you said that many schools are adapting these esports programs, but I'm curious to know, are any universities starting to have degree programs for esports players or scholarships from?
Yes, to both. We have programs that you can study esports, game development, shoutcasting, broadcasting, all kinds of stuff that's coming up across the whole country. Depending on which school you go to, you'll have different offerings, different focuses, but there's a lot that's being offered and more is being added every year. And we're also seeing a lot of support from scholarships as well. So just last year, the Ontario government added to their annual support for education $2 million of scholarships. And that's from the province of Ontario. There are still school specific scholarships that you can get in addition to that. So depending on which school you're looking at going to, depending on what they're looking for specifically, there are a lot of scholarships you can get in addition to that. And that's across the country.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like to share with us today, Melissa?
I think the next one coming up would be we're going to be focusing on activating Eastern Canada next year. So this past year, we really worked on building capacity and connecting with the teachers in Western Canada. So we have BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec's been doing this for a long time. So I won't include Quebec. They've been around for a long time. But everybody on Western Canada is all on board and ready to go and doing some really incredible stuff in the space. And now we're going to be looking at shifting our focus to Eastern Canada, but we also have some really cool opportunities for Canadian students to engage in exchanges now. We got to announce a few months, or I guess probably about a month ago, that we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Australia. And so there are going to be opportunities for students from Canada and Australia to get to learn from each other and potentially have some competitions and hopefully even some in-person exchanges. So those are all opportunities coming down the pipes.
Congratulations on everything that's happened. Having a deal with an entire continent, Australia, is huge.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
that's amazing. Good job.
Thank you.
How do you see esports education evolving in the upcoming years, Melissa?
I think we're going to see a lot more support, official support coming from boards of education. I think we're going to see a lot more international exchange being part of the conversation and dialogue because unlike traditional sports, esports is not limited geographically. We might have some issues with ping between different countries, depending on which servers you're working with. But for the most part, we don't have those same kinds of limitations. So I think that this is an opportunity for educators to really expand learning opportunities for their students that span well beyond the walls of their classroom. And I think that's going to be really exciting to see.
Are there any major differences from esports organizations in Canada from the United States of America, Melissa?
Depends on who you talk to. I think there's a lot of really cool things happening in the States. You have a much bigger population than we do, so that gives you a lot of options. But in Canada, the approach that we've kind of taken for the most part has been that we're working from a national level and then supporting the startup of individual province-based organizations. And that's just been kind of how it happened organically in our country. Whereas we're seeing in the United States a lot of really strong independent state-based organizations that are coming together to find what that looks like at a national level. So I think there's a lot to be learned on both sides of the border from the successes that both of us have had in these very different approaches.
Well, sorry, Sage, go on.
It's fine, thank you. What type of new jobs surrounding esports might become available in the future?
I think right now we're going to be seeing a lot more tournament organization going to be popping up. Now that we are out of the pandemic, we're seeing a big shift from those online events into more and more of those physical events. And the very interesting thing about physical event is that there's so many different jobs that come with those kinds of events because you have people that are going to be working behind the scenes, people that are working security, people that are working in setup and tear down production, even like the difference in production between the live stage events and the streams that are going to be happening. All of that creates jobs and opportunities for people to really showcase their talents and be part of an industry that they love. So I'm really excited to see all the things that come out of that.
What are a few skills that children develop from playing esports that will be valuable in future jobs?
That's one that I absolutely love. And I kind of hinted at it before in a few of my other questions, or answers, global competencies. So we're looking at things like critical thinking, we're looking at citizenship, collaboration, communication. All of those are really, really important because they are demanded by the games themselves. And when we are really intentional about developing those skills rather than just having it as like a side effect of playing the game, that when you're intentional about developing those skills, those become really valuable assets that transfer into any career you might want to explore in the future. A lot of folks are saying that in today's day and age, one of the most important skills you can have, or I guess I'll say two of the most important skills you can have are communication and creativity. And I think that those are both skills that are really fundamental to successful esports programs. And I think we're going to see a lot of students making use of those skills.
At what age do you think kids should start practicing esports?
What age? Well, my son started playing video games when he was 2.5. So I know there might be some parents that don't agree with that, but I think that if you are playing with your kids and you're being intentional about it, I don't think that there's an age that's really too young. When you look at how interaction with your kids in sports or interaction with your kids in music starts very, very, very early. And a lot of those early experiences are done through exposure of modeling, where when I'm playing piano at home or I'm playing drums at home, my kids are seeing that and they're learning from that. I also play video games at home. So they're seeing that and they're learning from that as well. So I don't think that there's an age that I would say is too young. I think it's more important that it be done together.
Okay. What final message would you like to send to kids who are passionate about esports and you want to have a career in the industry as they grow up?
Be intentional, be proactive, bring your best hustle. Always, always bring your best hustle at everything that you do. Advocate for yourself and your passions, and never lose your sense of creativity and wonder, because you can do incredible things when you have a little bit of hustle, a little bit of creativity, and everything is possible.
Phenomenal advice.
Yep, truly amazing advice. Now, before we go, I just want to ask you, this is kind of similar to our last one, but what final piece of general advice do you have for parents and children listening right now?
Play the games, have conversations, and let it be fun. Learning should be fun. And if we're removing fun from the learning experience, from education, we are doing a disservice to everybody, because we have seen from neurological research that our brains learn best when they're having fun. So embrace it and use it and be intentional with it, because the possibilities are endless.
Well, thank you for sharing your opinions and experiences with us today, Melissa. They were phenomenal, and hopefully our fans have learned something from watching this today. But before we go, how can people find out more about you and your programs online?
Well, you can go to esportcanada.org to find our website, and you can find us on social media. Twitter is probably the easiest one to find us on. So it's at esport_Canada, or myself directly is at Melissa Burns EDU.
Well, thank you for sharing. Our Canadian audience should check that out, especially if they live in a place where it's available.
Well, we really enjoyed today's conversation.
And thank you and the audience for joining us in today's episode of Esports, Metaverse, and Beyond. Bye.